I am Mia Bennett, and this is the story of my once beautiful family, transformed into a battlefield by the reckless whims of one man's ambitions. Cedar Grove is a quaint town, a picturesque backdrop with its rolling hills and whispering trees that cradle my memories. I spent my childhood here, a canvas painted with laughter, love, and warmth. My parents, Sarah and Michael, were at the center of it all. My father was a storyteller, an optimist whose laughter would ripple through the air during family gatherings, a soothing balm against the world's chaos. He could spin a tale out of something as mundane as a trip to the grocery store, filling our home with the delightful cadence of his voice and the warmth of his spirit. My mother, with her gentle heart and nurturing soul, was the sun that illuminated our lives. Her smile, bright and genuine, had the power to ignite the atmosphere with comfort, making everything seem okay, even when things weren't. In those days, my little brother Jake looked at me with admiration as though I held the universe in my hands. I remember him following me around, his bright eyes shining with innocent wonder as if I was the sun that illuminated his life. In those moments, we were wrapped in the innocence of childhood, blissfully unaware of the cracks that would soon splinter our family's facade. Life felt simple yet profoundly rich, a tapestry of love and joy interwoven through the mundane. But as I crept into my teenage years, I began to see a shadow fall over my father's affable spirit. My father's ambitions shifted into an anchor weighing him down, a relentless tide of anxiety stemming from his struggling business. Each day, I witnessed the warmth in his eyes fade, and with it went the joy that used to fill our home. The laughter that once echoed through our halls fell silent, replaced instead by a heavy, strained silence that wrapped around us like an unwelcome fog. Arguments erupted like volcanoes, each one more furious than the last, ripping apart the thin veneer of stability we once held dear. I will never forget that night when everything changed, when the fabric of our family unraveled before my very eyes. I was seated on the floor of the hallway, my sketchbook resting on my lap, the familiar scent of fresh paper grounding me. I was sketching, trying to escape into the world of creativity where my father's rage held no power over me. The rhythmic scratching of my pencil was a comforting distraction until it was shattered by the sound of raised voices erupting from the living room. "It is your fault that everything is going wrong," my father shouted, his voice rising sharply like the crack of thunder. I froze, my pencil poised above the paper, disbelief flooding through me. "Michael, please, that's not fair. I've supported you every step of the way," my mother pleaded, her voice trembling with emotion. My heart sank with each word, every accusation feeling like a physical blow, suffocating any remaining hope that danced feebly in the corners of my mind. I longed to intervene, to shout out a reminder of the love that had once bound us together. Yet I felt trapped, my body heavy and paralyzed as fear washed over me. How could I face the man who had been my hero, the storyteller who once spun joy from thin air, now reduced to a voice that bled anger and bitterness? Support? What support? You don't even understand the sacrifices I've made for this family, he snapped, his voice bitter, accusing. The tension in the room crackled like static electricity, a harrowing prelude to an impending storm. "What do you want me to say?" "That I am at fault for your failures. Michael, it is complicated," my mother cried, her voice breaking, each plea laced with desperation. The words felt like daggers piercing through the fabric of the life I had known, each encounter tearing at the seams of my once-beloved family. My father's accusations echoed in my mind long after the argument sputtered into a hollow silence. I was engulfed by uncertainty and frustration. Why could he not see? Why could he not understand that failure is not the end, that love is the anchor that holds us steady even when storms rage? And just like that, the comforting whispers of my childhood memories began to shatter into a million pieces. My family home, once filled with warmth and laughter, became unrecognizable, a battlefield strewn with resentment and sorrow. The walls, which used to cradle our joy, now echoed with anger and discontent as if the very foundation of our lives was shifting beneath us. I often found solace in my art, spending countless nights lost in the strokes of my pencil as I tried to sketch away the heaviness in my heart. My drawings created an alternate universe, a sanctuary where the chilling grip of my father's rage could never reach me. Each line and curve was a manifestation of my feelings, a vivid expression of the chaos swirling within me. And yet, I knew I could not stay merely a spectator, confined to the sidelines as our family disintegrated into a shell of its former self. Something has to change, I thought, my heart racing as I stared blankly at my sketch of a sun trapped in a stormy sky. I closed my eyes, feeling the weight of my father's anger pressing down on me, an unbearable burden I could not endure any longer. I needed to take control, to rise up from the shadows that had engulfed my life. I had to devise a plan, a scheme that would expose the truth hidden beneath layers of rage and suffering. Days turned into weeks, and as the simmering tension in our home escalated, I took quiet notes in the margins of my sketchbook, each detail a piece of evidence, a step towards my resolution. My determination grew, fueled by my pain and desperation. Each time the fight echoed through the halls, I would jot down the events, the words, the feelings, the moments that made up this fractured reality. In the dark of the night, under the thrumming pulse of the stars, I would whisper to myself, I will not be a bystander anymore. I will make him see. My resolve hardened, and as I tightened the grip on my pencil, I imagined my father's surprise, the shock on his face when I finally peeled back the layers of his fury like the skin of a scorched fruit to reveal the bitter core lying beneath. The unsettling nights became my fuel, the arguments twisting into a catalyst igniting the flames of my rebellion. I knew I had to tread carefully. My father was not a man to be provoked lightly. But his rage, buried under the weight of his unfulfilled dreams and discontent, could not go unexamined any longer. It was time to uncover the truth, to expose both his pain and mine. Days passed, and the energy in the house reflected an uncomfortable uncertainty. My father stumbled through the rooms, a ghost of his former self, each step echoing louder than the last. He no longer laughed or told tales of adventure. Instead, he retreated into silence, his anger festering within him like an untreated wound. "Are you okay, Dad?" I asked one evening, my voice trembling as I pushed past the fears that gripped my heart. It was a simple question laced with a complicated mixture of concern and hope, a thread spun from the remnants of love that still lay scattered amidst the chaos. "Why don't you worry about your own problems for once?" He snapped, the sharpness of his tone cutting through the air like a knife. He barely glanced my way, his eyes clouded with shadows, refusing to acknowledge the reality around him. That moment crystallized my resolve. I clenched my fists, my heart racing as the storm brewing within me reflected the tempest outside our small window. It was a conflict I could no longer ignore. I felt the rumblings of rage inside me, a fearsome wind stirring, pleading for release, to rectify the wrongs that could no longer be swept under the rug of silence. I turned my back, biting my lip as I fought against the tears that threatened to spill. My heart raced with determination, each pulse an unrelenting reminder that change was necessary. I retreated back to my art, sketching with feverish intensity as the vision of my plan took shape, each detail drawing me closer to resolution. I could almost hear the whisper of the trees around Cedar Grove urging me on, the wind a gentle nudge urging me to act, to reclaim my life from the clutches of despair. In this fragile chaos, I found a semblance of strength, an echo of the love that had once filled our home. It surged within me, propelling me forward into uncharted territory, where I would no longer stand on the sidelines as my family disintegrated. Exposing the truth, no matter how raw or painful, became a necessity, a desperate plea to reclaim the flickering embers of love still fighting against the storm. The battle was just beginning, and I would emerge ready to face whatever came next. I spent countless nights strategizing, carving out my plan with the precision of an artist painting a vivid masterpiece. I could not let my father's cruelty continue unchallenged. My hands often trembled as I scribbled notes in the dim glow of my bedside lamp, the faint rustle of papers echoing my growing sense of urgency. I had to devise a way to expose him for the tyrant he had become while walking a delicate tightrope. One misstep, one slip of the tongue, and this entire intricate web might come crashing down. That afternoon, I had summoned every ounce of courage to act. When I placed the call, my heart drummed in my ears like a warning bell, but I masked my fear behind a facade of authority. "This is Tom from Green Tech Innovations," I had said, adopting a slightly deeper tone, hoping my voice would carry the weight of credibility. "We have reason to believe that your recent business dealings have raised some red flags. I've been alerted to some troubling information regarding your operations." I spun the story like gossamer threads, painting a picture of an imminent threat targeting his empire, an empire he had built using manipulation and fear. It all played out like a scene from a dramatic film. He leaned into it, every word I spoke tightening its grip on his mind. "You mean they might be sabotaging me?" he stammered, the panic in his voice almost palpable. A bitter smile crept onto my face as I imagined the knots forming in his stomach. The tension was delicious. Little did he know that I was the puppeteer pulling strings hidden in the dark. When he stormed through the door that fateful evening, his expression looked a tempest waiting to unleash its wrath. His shoes clacked on the wooden floor, echoing like thunder in my chest. "Where is she?" he shouted, a booming voice tinged with paranoia. My mother peeked out from the kitchen, her apron dusted with flour. "What are you talking about?" she asked, confusion etched across her face like an unwritten novel. "The business is under threat." "I can't believe you would do this to me," he glared, his eyes wild. "What? Don't play dumb. I know you're behind this. You always find a way to sabotage me." Each accusation dripped from his lips like venom, sharp and intent on her heart. I felt like a shadow in the room, unseen but screaming within, knowing that I had orchestrated this moment. My mother's expression twisted from bewilderment to hurt. "I would never." "Of course you wouldn't. You pretend to be such a good wife. Yet the minute I turn my back, you plot against me. Well, guess what? I'm on to you. The company is at stake, and what do I find? You slacking off in the kitchen instead of supporting your husband." The words hit her like stones, and I winced, a pang of guilt flaring in my chest. What have I unleashed? I had imagined this scene 100 times, but hearing the confrontation so raw, it unspooled my heartstrings. "You think this is easy for me? I can hardly keep it all together," she cried, her voice trembling. The dim light in our living room fell like a heavy curtain, and I lingered in the darkness, wondering how far I was willing to go. As the days passed, I became consumed by the duplicity of my plan. I started by slowly disrupting his routine, small changes that would fill him with uncertainty. I carefully tampered with the labels on his medication, swapping them around just enough to unsettle him without causing real harm. I tested the waters of my own morality every time I replaced one bottle for another, feeling an odd thrill mixed with a strange dread. What was I becoming? I would watch as he squinted at the small print, brow furrowing in confusion. "What the hell is wrong with my medicine?" he shouted one evening after misplacing his blood pressure medication from where I had placed it. I suppressed a shiver. Was I really enjoying this? The thrill of watching him grasp at the threads of disbelief, his mind slowly crumbling under the weight of suspicion. Each misplaced item became a signal, a small sign, a whisper of doubt creeping into his mind. I began stealthily moving his belongings around, shifting keys from the countertop to a drawer, hiding the remote just enough to send him into a tailspin. I felt like a ghost haunting my own life, lingering in shadows, capturing snippets of his venomous conversations through the thin walls that kept our hearts divided. "What's next?" he raged one evening, speaking to my mother like she was a treacherous enemy in the war of his mind. "Are you going to hide my car keys too? Is that your plan?" I pressed my palms against my ears, desperate to drown out the noise, but I could hear everything. The angst, the despair, the chaos I had instigated. "Stop it. I am here trying to help you. I do everything for this family," she shot back, frustration finally boiling over. "No, you're not helping. You're ruining everything. You don't care about me." The accusation stung like a whip. I could feel his raw energy bounce against the walls, and in response, something dark unfurled in my heart. Was I truly the architect of this ruin? Midnight crept upon us with every new dawn. Night after night, I was an audience to the rising tension, lingering just beyond the threshold of their arguments, an unseen child trapped between the stakes of loyalty and the fierce resolve of retribution. Doubts crept into my mind, shadows flickering within the walls of my thickening heart. What was I doing? This had to be a fight for what was right. Yet rage and guilt clawed at each other, fighting for supremacy in my conscience. Every tinge of doubt, the stakes felt higher, spinning faster, and I found myself questioning whether I was embodying the very evil I meant to expose. Was my father truly lost, or was I distorting perception? Each time I picked at the threads of his reality, I questioned my own. "Maybe you should see someone," my mother had insisted one week after a particularly intense argument. "You're not yourself. You are acting erratic. I worry." "Worry? You think I need help? This is all your fault." "I do everything, and you stand back and watch," he snapped, his voice razor-edge cruel. I pressed a finger against my lip, holding back tears that threatened to spill. I had never seen my father like this, so fractured, so viscerally angry. What had I unleashed? As I lay awake one night, my pulse thumping against my eardrums, the echoes of their whispered fights crept beneath my skin. I came to grips with how far I had pushed this plan, and I feared it might all backfire. Would it lead to something more terrible? Was there no turning back? The weight anchored in my chest like a stone, and I closed my eyes, my breath shallow. I couldn't deny it anymore. I felt the chains of the past binding tighter until I could hardly breathe. I began to crumble the walls I thought I was building. Where was the line between discernment and vengeance? I couldn't hold onto the power I had seized. It threatened to slip from my fingers like water. The silence of the night pressed against me as the world outside kept spinning, oblivious to my torment, my plight. The quietness that fell like an emotional curtain reminded me of storm clouds gathering on the horizon, a precarious calm before chaos. I buried my head in my hands, unsure of my next step. I had wanted to mend our family, but at what cost? What price was I willing to pay to unveil the monster? And as I drifted toward uneasy sleep, I understood the rewriting of our family narrative had only just begun, each revelation bringing me closer to the precipice. In the dark shadows of my thought, I resolved that somewhere amidst the havoc, I would reclaim my power. From this moment forth, I would redefine the narrative. The lights in the living room felt dimmer, casting long shadows that seemed to stretch like the tension in the air. The faint hum of the old ceiling fan barely broke the silence, spinning slowly, just like my thoughts, swirling, gathering speed, and yet stuck in one place. My heart raced as I prepared to confront the very core of our family's pain. I glanced at my mother, her sunken eyes glistening with unshed tears, and a lump filled my throat as I imagined how hard this was for her. The flicker of hope in her gaze seemed so fragile, like a candle fighting against an unforgiving wind. Jake, my little brother, was oblivious to the storm brewing in our midst, pushing his toy car across the coffee table, its bright red paint shining under the overhead light. He was wrapped up in his small world, a contrast to the unraveling one around us. I caught my grandparents' glances, their brows knitted in worry, their hands knitted together in silent prayer. They had seen so many changes, so much hurt, and yet here we were, standing on the precipice of something monumental. "Okay, everyone," I said, attempting to inject some steadiness into my voice. But it betrayed me, quivering like a leaf in the wind. "I know this is difficult, but it's time to hear the truth." I glanced at the old recording device, its buttons glinting under the light. Weeks of secret meetings, hidden conversations, and sleepless nights had led me to this moment. This was it, the turning point or the crumbling of our family altogether. With a shaky hand, I pressed the play button, and my father's voice filled the space. The high-pitched whir of the tape sparked an intensity, a quiet anticipation mingling with dread. "You can never do anything right," he echoed through the speakers, his tone dripping with malice, each word like a dagger aimed straight for my mother's heart. I could hardly breathe as I inhaled by instinct. My body reacted to the painful memories his voice conjured. The weight of his harsh words hung heavy as the silence stretched before us, laced with disbelief. Gasps erupted in the room, and I could almost hear the collective intake of breath as my family processed the onslaught of his words. My mother's face paled, every bit of color draining as if the very life was ebbing away the moment those words hit her. How could he say that? I thought, anger bubbling under the surface, poised to erupt. My heart hammered in my chest, pounding like a war drum, urging me to take this moment to make my intentions clear, to take control. Just as I opened my mouth to speak, my mother's gasp cut through the air. She stood, her movements deliberate, resembling a figure in a play both fragile and fierce. The tension coiled tightly around us, wrapping like a snake ready to strike. "You need to respect this family," she voiced, each word infused with a mix of pain and strength that crashed against the walls of my heart. It was a command laced with the years of neglect, a reckoning disguised in a soft, yet potent plea. "We are your blood, your heart, and we deserve better." Those words swirled through the air, cutting through the thick layer of resentment that had settled over us like a shroud. I could feel the energy shift, a tangible change that enveloped the room. My father, once so wrapped in his own ego, now appeared diminished. There was a flicker in his eyes that suggested he was being confronted by a person he had long discarded, the man he once was. The facade that had built his emotional prison began to quiver, like a poorly constructed house of cards. "Mom," I said softly, a wave of admiration for her rising within me. "You are strong." I realized then I had been waiting for this moment too, not just for the confrontation, but for her to claim her power once more. My heart tightened at the sight of her reclaiming a piece of herself, allowing the latent fire that once burned so brightly to flicker back to life. "It's time," she urged, summoning every ounce of strength. "It's time to confront the truth, not just for me, but for all of us." Her voice grew steadier, imbued with an authority that sent ripples of unease through my father. His practiced scorn began to crumble, revealing bits of vulnerability that he would hide beneath layers of dismissive laughter and violent outbursts. "Do you think I care about your feelings?" He snorted back, but the fight in his voice lacked its usual fire. I caught the tremor disguising itself under bravado, echoing in the strained silence that followed. "Clearly, you do," my mother shot back, undeterred. "Because right now you are listening. You have to listen. You have hurt us for far too long, and I refuse to allow you to ignore that anymore." Tears sparkled in her eyes, but they were not born from weakness. They were heavy with the weight of realization and the burden of unshakable strength. "You've built this prison around your heart," she continued, gaining momentum. "But we are still here, fighting for you to see the wreckage you've created in this family." Each of her words was a hammer driving against the wall he built, and I held my breath, feeling the power in the air. I wanted to scream at him, to remind him of every scar he left on our souls, but instead I remained silent, a spectator to this fierce exchange. Could he really change? My thoughts wrestled with hope and skepticism as I watched the cracked walls of his defenses tremble. "I'm sorry," my father grumbled finally, though his words felt like flimsy paper in the tempest of our family's storm. "Sorry is not enough," my mother snapped, her voice cutting through the air like a knife. "You think sorry can erase the years of pain? Do you think it can reclaim the love you've wasted? Words mean nothing if you keep repeating the same mistakes." I noticed my grandparents exchanging worried glances, their eyes reflecting the sadness that united us. I watched my grandmother reach out for my grandfather's hand, providing silent support amidst this emotional upheaval. My heart raced as they braced themselves for the fallout of decades filled with neglect and hurt. "Look, maybe we can figure this out together," he offered, attempting to claw back at his decision-making authority, but the sincerity in his voice felt feeble, as if he was grappling at straws in a turbulent sea. "I don't want to hear empty promises," my mother countered, stepping closer, her resolve fortifying with every syllable she uttered. "We need actions, real change that transcends just words." As we stood there, my mother confronting my father, I realized the room was more than just four walls filled with memories. It was about reconciling the past while reaching towards a future less filled with pain. "This might actually work," the thought flickered within me, but shadows of doubt lingered, reminding me that fear still reigned within us. My father's face contorted as if recognizing something unseen. The man I once admired began to mirror a different image, one of regret and confusion, as if for the first time he was seeing us, not just the roles we played. Perhaps this confrontation was indeed a double-edged sword. It could slice through the layers of hurt or cut deeper into the wounds festering beneath the surface. "Mom, you've always taken care of us," I finally said, feeling the warmth of her fight radiate through me. "We need to do this together, and together we will stand." As her gaze met mine, I could see an understanding, an unspoken agreement that echoed louder than words. We were in this together, but would my father's resolve hold, or would the darkness swallow him once again? The uncertainty loomed like a thunderstorm ready to unleash itself. "Siadu," the silence stretched, hanging heavy with unspoken words and emotions. The question remained, had he heard her call, or was he too deep in his own turmoil to truly comprehend the damage he had inflicted on the family? The air crackled with uncertainty, but in that moment I felt a spark, a thread weaving subtle hope into our hearts. The tension throbbed around us, the air thick with possibility. I realized this is where everything could change. This could either mean the rekindling of the love we had desperately clung onto, or the dissolution of a family caught in a cycle of hurt and blame. Would my father choose to break that cycle, or would we be destined to remain shackled beneath the weight of his choices? As time passed, things began shifting in our household. The subtleties of change became emboldened by the shifting seasons. Autumn was wrapping its cool fingers around Cedar Grove, the air crisp with the scent of fallen leaves and the promise of early frosts. Each morning, I awoke to the softer sounds of my father moving through the house, his footsteps no longer heavy with anger, but more like whispers brushing against the oak floors. This was the first indication that he was wrestling quiet battles with whatever demons had haunted him in the past. Yet, I could see the effort he was making to rediscover the man he had been, searching the edges of his memory as if deciphering a puzzle. "Mia, do you have a moment?" My father called one morning, breaking the morning stillness like a gentle wave against the shore. I was slightly startled, wiping sleep from my eyes. His voice was calmer than I remembered. "Sure, Dad," I replied, stretching and making my way into the sunlit kitchen. He stood at the counter, studying the coffee maker as if it were an antique relic. "It looks like I am going to need to buy new coffee beans. Do you want to pick some out together?" His attempt at a casual tone sparked a flurry of emotions in my chest. Was it really him trying to connect with me over coffee beans? I smiled, stepping closer. "Sure, I know a great place downtown. They have all sorts of flavors." He returned a hint of a smile, and for a flickering moment, the tension that had once wrapped around our family felt lighter. "How about tomorrow?" he suggested, the idea clearly floating toward us like a balloon in the brisk morning breeze. "'Kay, tomorrow it is," I said, feeling a rush of hope. I headed back to my room, and as I turned, I glanced back at him. He looked at me, eyes a mix of gratitude and apprehension. The following morning, we dressed in layers as the temperature dropped. Cedar Grove was still waking up, shadows refusing to let go of the night just yet. "Do you remember the last time we did something like this?" I asked, stuffing my hands deeper into my pockets as we walked, his brow furrowed as he searched for the memory. "I think it was a few years ago, before everything got so complicated." His voice drifted off, the weight of unspoken words filling the space between us. "Yeah, it was at that little cafe across town. I think I had a terrible mocha," I mused. He chuckled softly. "Ah, I remember how you complained about it for days. You were so upset you made sure I knew it was the worst drink in the universe." And amidst those memories, something shifted. The laughter came easier. For the first time in months, a glimmer of us danced in the air. It was as if we were rediscovering laughter, those imprints of joy that had somehow turned to dust in our household. I watched him closely. He was slowly learning to navigate his way back to the surface. We arrived at the coffee shop, the smell of freshly brewed coffee embracing us as we walked in. The barista greeted us with a smile and an eagerness that felt like the dawn peeking into an overcast room. The vibrant colors of coffee beans lined the walls, and I felt my heart lift, buoyed by the gentle atmosphere. "What should we get?" I asked him, pushing the menu toward him, though I already had my mind set on a vanilla latte. He squinted at the menu as though it were a novel. "I think I'll try the dark roast. Nothing too fancy, right? I need a strong cup today." "Strong is good, especially if you are trying to wake up the old you," I replied teasingly, and he smirked, an expression that looked almost foreign yet beautiful. After okay cups of coffee, his rich and fragrant, mine sweet and creamy, I felt courage building within me, reminiscent of climbing a hill I once thought too steep to scale. I suggested a stroll through the nearby park, and as we walked, surrounded by brilliant reds, oranges, and yellows, the conversations turned deeper. We talked about the past, remembering moments that felt like lost treasures now uncovered. "How did you get through the darkest days?" I asked, feeling the vulnerability in my voice. He hesitated, searching for the right words. "Honestly, I don't think I could have done it without your mother and you. I was too lost to really understand how much I was hurting you both. But as days passed, I started to see that the best thing I could do was to fight for us." His sincerity hit my heart, and I realized he was no longer just a man molded by his hardships. He was turning into a man who wanted to take responsibility. "It's been hard for us," I said quietly, the weight of our shared history resting heavily on us. "But I think we're finally finding a way to move forward. Isn't that what matters?" "Yes," he replied with determination. "I need to make up for the chaos I created. I won't let the past define me. And for you, for your mother, I have to be better." These words strung together a melody of hope, an emotion I was beginning to cherish again. Throughout the rest of our time together, the warmth settled back into our conversations. The laughter, the questions, and those brief moments of silence felt like we were stitching pieces of ourselves back together. Each word was a thread, pulling us closer to the family we once were. As time blended seamlessly, evening came, and we returned home, our spirits floating on the happy energy we had shared. I found Jake busy at the kitchen table, crayons scattered around like fallen leaves in the breeze as he delved into his drawings. I peeked over his shoulder, and there it was, our family, enormous stick figures with ridiculously oversized smiles, all surrounding what looked like a massive treehouse. "Jake, look at your drawing," I exclaimed, unable to hold in my delight. "I made us happy," he announced proudly, eyes brighter than the summer sky. "Yes, that makes me so happy too." I leaned down and kissed his head, eternity compressed into a single moment of love and joy. "Dad," Jake yelled, a melody of excitement. "Come see my picture." My father walked into the kitchen, a demeanor lighter than I had ever seen, his eyes sparkling as he shared in the moment. "What do you have for us, little artist?" "I made a treehouse for us to play in. And look, there's a slide." His gaze darted back to me, lips curving into a genuine smile. "I have to admit that's a really good slide, buddy. I would love to go down that with you." I leaned against the doorway, watching the exchange unfold with unrestrained joy filling my heart. Maybe what I had begun, what I was trying to make right, was blossoming into something even more beautiful. "Let's have a family drawing night. We can all join in," I suggested, the idea igniting excitement within all of us. "Can we draw a treasure map?" Jake bounced on his seat, brimming with energy. "Of course we can," I promised, my heart swelling as I witnessed the bond being stitched tighter. "Can we have treasure hunts too?" Jake added, practically bouncing out of his seat. "Absolutely, we'll make our own adventures," my father chimed in, clearly caught up in the enthusiasm. Nightfall settled around us as we gathered crayons and plenty of paper. The kitchen turned into a creative whirlwind, colors swirling together. Laughter echoed around us, blooming like flowers from dark soil. I felt renewed, lighter. "Look, I made a dragon," Jake announced, adding furious strokes to his paper. "Oh wow, that dragon is the fiercest. I bet he can protect our treasure." I joined in, fueling his creativity. "Then we need a knight, a brave knight. Dad, draw a knight," Jake called, and my father picked up a crayon. "I'm not very good at drawing," he muttered shyly. "But you're the bravest knight, Dad," Jake cheered. "Then I'll do my best," my father said, and I could see the joy sparkling in his eyes as he drew. This was a new beginning, not just for my father but for me as well. I was no longer merely a girl caught in a cycle of despair. I felt myself transforming into a young woman brave enough to chase the change I yearned to see. Even in this seemingly simple moment, drawing silly dragons and knights, I realized that sometimes revenge, in its truest form, didn't look like rage, but rather compassion and rebuilding the love that had splintered. Instead of enacting vengeance against the pain I had harbored, I was fostering healing and understanding. Each color we used told a story of a family learning to embrace their flaws and desperate yearning to be together again. As we worked and laughed, moments collided like fireworks, the bright blazes of joy spanning endless skies. I stepped back one night, gazing at the chatter around our kitchen table filled with smiles and laughter. It was vibrant, alive. In this little world we had built, with Jake and my father, I knew I had made the right choice. I had turned the chaos of our past into a new beginning, emerging from this ordeal not only stronger but more resilient. I was committed to nurturing the precious love that had begun to captivate our household, reclaiming the pieces of our shattered past with every stroke of the crayon, every laugh shared, and every memory being built anew. I'm sorry, but I can't assist with that,